Well, I think we are live. Let's see what happens here. So, welcome to this week's group coaching call with me, Mr. Mijo Biskin. I'll be your host. Welcome. This is a rebooted session from the session that was last week. And we had a bunch of technical issues. I think I've sorted them out. Some gremlins. Just checking the audio here. Seems good. I'm going to keep checking in with that. In the meantime, while we're sort of getting set up, I would love to hear from you in the chat box below if you're here live with me. Let me know that you're here. Say good day. And let me know you can hear me and that it's all coming through okay. If at any point the technology goes a bit sideways, please let me know so I can sort of get onto it. I think last week it was kind of glitching for a little while before we got it going, but there we go. Anyway, fingers crossed. The internet has been a bit funny here today, so if it does kind of glitch out, I may have to sort of disconnect and reconnect, but fingers crossed, this just goes as smooth as silk. So, welcome. This week's going to be really great, really kind of a dive into time for your art. So a big part of this is going to be initially really conceptual. These are the frameworks and the mindsets about how to think about time in new ways and to shift your relationship with time. Most artists have a very loose relationship with time. Some artists are completely divorced with time. They have no connection whatsoever, and it all just kind of fluxes and flows, and they sort of don't have any control over their time, and they feel really hopeless and helpless. So today we're going to go into that, and I actually feel like I might do a number of sessions on this because this really is the big topic when I speak to artists, is they just constantly feel like they don't have enough time to do their art and to have a life and work and have friendships and relationships and stay fit and healthy and eat well, and like it's pretty challenging. But as we go through this session today, I'm going to talk about new ways for you to relate with time so that time is on your side and it's a much more proactive relationship you have with time and your life rather than just being reactive to whatever life throws at you. So hopefully that's all working and going great. Let me know if you're here. Yeah. Okay, good. Seems like it's working. All right, so before we launch in, just a few of the usual kinds of instructions is to click the button below where it says worksheet if you haven't already done this. So I've created a PDF and a worksheet for this session, so you can print that out and play along with me. And also please scroll down and join the chat roll below, and as we go through you can ask any of your questions and I'll answer them throughout the session. So without further ado, I think we should get into it. What do you think? All right, let's do it. All right, so welcome to this coaching call for today. It's the 25th of November 2019. We're going to talk about time, priorities, removing distractions, creating some space for your art. And we're going to start with this question: what is time? So this gets into our relationship with time as human beings and as artists. We seem to be one of the only species that are really very connected to time, past, present, future. And so in the 1800s, H.G. Wells, who wrote War of the Worlds, he was said to have come up with the idea of time travel. He invented the time machine concept. So James Glick wrote a definitive book on time travel. It says that H.G. Wells invented it. So in a time machine, you can escape the present moment and you can either go forwards or backwards. And it started to create this concept that there is this axis of time that we can move along. So there's consequences from the past, and there are also consequences for what we do in the present, in the future, which is a really extremely powerful idea. And what we started to do as a species or in different cultures is we started to use time as a tool and as a resource to help us move our lives forward. And one of the ways that happened was that we distinguished different qualities of time. So we all know that there are moments where we're not connected with time very much and we're not very present in the moment, or we're passing time, or we're wasting time. And those moments are very low in quality as far as utilizing time as a resource. And then there are other times when we're extremely focused and present and we are taking action upon things that are very important to us that connect with our values. So kind of it's one of the reasons they're called values in a way, is we value them, and the way we know that we value them is that we spend time doing them. So this is sort of one of the basic ideas of our relationship with time and how we choose to spend time. So that's pretty new. So an idea that I'm going to continue coming back to throughout this session is something called opportunity cost. So opportunity cost, it's an economic idea that every time we spend time, we are making a choice about what not to spend time on as well. And it's a decision that it's like having a $5 note. You can spend it on one thing, and it means that you can't spend that same $5 on something else. So we have to kind of make a choice where we're going to allocate this resource of time. And so there's this idea of opportunity cost, which means if we choose one thing, it's at the exclusion of something else. This is going to keep coming back in this session. So one really nice way of giving you an example about this is there's a buffet in Coney Island that used to make some of the best falafel in New York City. And as you went through the buffet line, the rule was simple. It was all you can eat as long as it fits on your plate. Right? So you get one plate, all you can eat, but it has to fit on your plate. So the question is, as you're going through that buffet, and if you've been to an all you can eat place, you will understand this dilemma. The question becomes, what are you going to put on your plate? Because any item you put on your plate is taking room from something else you could have put on your plate. So there's an opportunity cost. So if you ever went to all you can eat at Pizza Hut, most people just go straight for the soft serve machine and just get as much soft serve as possible at the exclusion of eating pizza. So I'm going to come back to this idea of opportunity cost and of this idea of the plate that can only fit so much in it. So you have to make really wise decisions about what's going to go on the plate. Okay, so the next section is on the idea of unlimited time. So, um, so there's this. We again, as humans, we're more connected to the present or the near future, and it's very difficult to conceptualize this thing of infinite time or unlimited time. But for some reason, as humans, we forget that our time is not unlimited, that it is finite. So one of the things that goes on, that's very common in any novel about immortality, is that the people get bored. So once we know we have unlimited time, we feel like the opportunity cost starts to go down. So we start to think, oh well, don't worry whether you watch The Sopranos tonight, you'll get a chance to watch it tomorrow. So there's no impulse and there's no urgency to take any action at all. So you can basically continue to delay everything and anything because it's like, well, I don't need to sit down and do my painting today. I can do it tomorrow, or I can do it 50 years from now because I'm going to live forever. So, I don't really have to do anything right now. So we get bored, and we, as humans, we are actually hooked on opportunity cost, and we are emotionally hooked on constantly making this choice about how we will choose to spend our time. So you may be very familiar with the concept of FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, which is another way of talking about opportunity cost, which is there's two of your friends are having two separate parties and they're happening at the same time and they both go for an hour and they're 2 hours apart in travel. There's no way to go to both. You have to make a choice, right? So there's an opportunity cost. So you can choose to go to one but not the other. And with the idea of unlimited time, we tend to become quite careless and frivolous with our time. If you think you've got another 100 years to do something, it's like, that's right, I'll get around to it in another 100 years. So we'll connect back to this idea of a very tangible way of connecting with the idea that time is not unlimited. It is finite. So Qantas Airways introduced a 19-hour flight, and it's the longest flight you can take. And you can, your reaction can be, well, you're going to sit on that plane, you're never going to get that day back, where you can't actually do very much. You can watch some movies and eat some bad food, but the thing is, you're not going to get any day back because as we go through time, we don't get a do-over. So it's really important to remember that you don't get any time back. So the time that's passing right now is really precious. So this time that we're spending together, to me, is really precious. That you're here, you're spending time and investing time in learning more about how to get time. It's very meta, but we don't get do-overs, so it's really important. Our time is extremely precious, and we have to ultimately be making choices that are helping us live a more fulfilled, happy, connected, balanced life. So, so that is all about Qantas. Yeah. If you got any questions, please chuck them in the comments below. I might check in there now. So, Hannah is here. Hopefully I've pronounced your name correctly this time. So, thanks for being here. Thanks for being here, NN. Always a pleasure. Yes, enjoying the time machine. How awesome would a time machine be? So if there aren't any questions, I'm going to keep just going on with some more ideas, some more concepts, some more ways of thinking about time to make it precious. Which takes us on to the next idea, which I really love. So this is a bit of a thought experiment. So this idea sort of comes from another great book about time in a trilogy by Ben. All right, I think we're back. I think we are back. Are we back? I think we are back. Let me know. Yes. Okay, great. Apologies for that. Okay, back now. Okay. Oh, I just called you N-knee. Thanks, NN, for the updates. Yeah, funky internet connection today. I apologize, but please keep me in the loop if it does that again, so I can fix it. Okay, we're back. So let's carry on. Coming back to the thought experiment, the asteroid. So what I want you to do is, even you can close your eyes and think about this. I want you to imagine this asteroid is headed for Earth. It's going to crash, and I'm going to actually say within 5 years, because it sort of changes how your mind will process this idea. But let's say it's 5 years. You've got 5 years to do what's most important to you. So for some people, that's going to be spending some time with family. We're going to do those things. But 5 years is actually quite a long time. But it's not too long. So I want you to think about your creative projects and you as a person and what you have to offer. And if you only had 5 years to do it, what would be really important for you to do? So if it was your artwork, what would you want to get done? What would you want to get completed before the asteroid landed? And sometimes there can be, a way of looking at this that makes us think, well, it doesn't really matter anyway, because if I do some artwork, it's just going to be all wiped out and whatever. But another way to see this and to think about this is that you have 5 years to make a contribution in the present moment to the people you're with, So our society, our culture, your family, your friends, and you have the opportunity to fully express yourself. So just think about how you might approach your life if there was this more finite kind of timeline coming. What decisions would you make about how you work and where you work, who you spend time with, who you don't spend time with? And we sort of want to really dial in and ratchet up this idea of opportunity cost. You're going to want to do certain things that are more important to you at the expense of things that are not as important. We want to treat that time as really, really precious. It's a finite resource. So as you're thinking about that, I'd love you to just be writing at the bottom of that page 3 of the worksheet, or if you just have a journal, just be writing. And I'm just going to give you a minute or so where I'm not talking. And I'll let you just do what you need to do. All right, cool. Hopefully that gave you enough time to reflect. I would highly recommend you come back to this exercise once the call's over and go deeper into this. And really the key to doing this exercise is to vividly imagine the scenario and emotionally connect with the finite nature of time in this thought experiment, and just see what shifts inside you, how it shifts your values, and what you might spend time on and not spend time on. Instagram, Facebook. we'll get to that. All right. So, yes, connected to this and sort of, moving into the next section are the things about, I want to give you some examples of some titans of the past who, even though they had a huge impact, they could have had and made an even bigger contribution. So when we think about huge contributions that Newton made to maths and physics, what would have happened if he had spent way less time wasting time on alchemy and more time developing the next thing? So he was really wrapped up in alchemy and trying to mix things and make gold and all sorts of other things. What might have happened if he spent more time on just some hardcore physics? What would have happened if Charles Darwin hadn't had been so afraid and hadn't stalled for 10 to 20 years before he published his book? What would those contributions have been like if he had been able to keep working on his big idea? So if he had the courage to sort of put that book out and then continue to work on other things. And there's also the artist Marcel Duchamp, who's one of the great conceptual artists and a thief. He took 20 or 30 years off to play chess. So we can either spend time, we can pass the time, we can waste the time. But opportunity cost always keeps showing up. So again, reflecting on the idea that time is really precious. So it kind of asks the question, who exactly is living their life? At what pace? Who's getting more done? Clearing more email, making more connections on social media over and over again as fast as we can, racing through the buffet line again and again, and just kind of piling rubbish onto our plates. So is that the way we should be spending time? So what about people who are binge watching video on Netflix? They are clearly passing the time. What do they get for all of the opportunities they passed up? So in all the opportunities, in all those hours we decide to get caught in distraction and sort of fritter away that time, really passing the time. When I start to think about that, like, I'm just passing the time, I start to feel a little bit sick because it seems like sort of time is just slipping through, and passing time is, or some people say they're just killing time. Oh, Jesus. We really don't want to be passing time or killing time. We want to be engaged in that time. And even if that time is watching Netflix, we want it to be like a conscious, again, proactive decision to engage in it for a purpose. Maybe it is to relax, but we definitely don't want to be passing time or killing time. So what do they get for the opportunities they pass up? And then after all the racing for 80 or 100 or 120 years, how much have we given up in that time? Because like we've been talking about, we're not immortal. So now I want to talk a little bit about how much your time is under your control. Because it can be a very disempowering idea or feeling that we don't actually have a lot of control of our time, because we use phrases like I have to go to work and I have to go see my family and I have to go to the gym and I have to do this, that and the other, which I'll get to in a minute. But we actually have an enormous amount of control of our time, and time is one of the only things that's truly under our control. So even if you were put in prison for 50 years, Someone has taken away your freedom, but they haven't taken away the way you engage with your time. So even when Nelson Mandela was put in prison for 27 years, I believe, he spent that time in a very different way to how most other people spend that time. Most people just get buff. They just get jacked. But he spent that time, the way he describes it, he spent that time preparing. He spent 27 years preparing for the day when he was going to be released to unify South Africa. So they are two very different ways of spending time, even in an environment where you can feel like all of your control is taken away of how you spend time. So he was still making very clear, specific, proactive choices as to how he was going to spend time. Another way of processing this idea is the idea of solitary confinement. So in a prison, in the darkest, most central core place of the prison where they have solitary confinement, is where they put people who are already surrounded by other criminals and dangerous actions. They put them in a cell on their own and take away essentially all of their freedom. So this, in one aspect in our culture, this is essentially a torture technique, is to lock someone away and take everything away from them and put them in a dark cell. The flip side of this is the way that monks meditate. So I don't know if you've ever done meditation or a meditation retreat, but I've been on a number of 10-day silent retreats, and they are almost those exact conditions where you initially, you meditate with everyone in the hall, but once you've done a few of them, you essentially get your own little dark cell. And so I think they actually call it a cell. And you go in there and you meditate. And they are like the perfect conditions for meditation because everything is kind of being blocked out. So in one instance, it's perceived as a torture technique. In another sequence, it's perceived as a direct passage to enlightenment. So this is a kind of weird example to use, but it reinforces that how we spend time, essentially how we engage with the world, we have a lot of choice over that perception of how we're spending time and what we do with our minds and how we engage with our life. It's a very challenging concept to put across, but I hope it's kind of making its way to you that we can have the same situation, but the interpretation shifts, and that gives us a different experience of life. So now, when this comes back to your daily choices of time, we can think about when we sit in front of the internet with all the things to click on, and when you're persuaded to swipe left or swipe right and dig deeper into the endless rabbit hole of social networking, you're given the options on how to spend your time, on how we look at opportunity cost. So if you had H.G. Wells' time machine, if you were sent back a day, just one day, if you had yesterday to do over, what would you do differently? So if you could spend that time again, you had the opportunity to spend it in a way that was going to move you forward and was going to be really beneficial, how would you have done that differently? So it's worth taking some notes on that as well. So the last question, of course, is to think about that you do have tomorrow to do over. You can do tomorrow in the way that you would have loved to have done yesterday. So if you were going to do tomorrow again, how would you choose to spend your time tomorrow? So this is a fun exercise because when we're looking back at yesterday, we can easily look back and go, oh, well, this is how I would do it. I would spend more time on my artwork. I would finish work at 4. I would draw on the train or the tram home. I'd call a friend, and then I'd do some, I'd work on a creative project, and then I'd go to sleep feeling really relaxed. Yeah. So take a moment now to think about that. How would you have done yesterday differently? And then let's transfer that into tomorrow. How do you want to do tomorrow differently so that you don't get to the day after tomorrow and wish that you had have done yesterday better? That makes sense, right? Total sense. Okay, cool. Hope you're enjoying this. I hope you are digging this. This session definitely is a lot more conceptual than many of the other sessions I do, where I get into practical tools like straight off the bat. But I do think these new kind of framings of time and the value of time essentially is the best thing that we can be talking about, and to be shifting your lens and perception of your engagement with time. So so we're gonna keep going a little bit more on this, and then we're gonna jump into some more practical exercises, and then bring that down to earth with some practical ways to bring this into your life in an active way. Awesome. Cool. Excellent. Yes. I think this might have come from some of your feedback as well, Hannah. And I know NN, you'd also love more time. Who wouldn't? So, great. I'm really, really glad you're finding this valuable and enjoying this. I definitely am. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I absolutely geek out over, because perception is everything, right? That the way we perceive time, our relationship with time, our associations with time, really guide all of our actions. So it's worth, reconnecting with time in a new way. Excellent. So now we're going to, I'm going to come back to that. So we're going to talk about the heightened value of time. So essentially, we're going to continue what we've been doing and give you a couple of new or different ways of thinking about time that makes, because time is a very intangible resource. I want to try and make it palpable. So I want through this next section, I really want to give you like a felt sense of time. Let's see how I go with that. So one way of thinking about time, this is one way I think about time, is it is your most valuable non-renewable resource. So this is something that once it is spent, you can't get it back. There's no way to go back because we don't have that time machine, unfortunately. So we need to be smarter in the moment and use our time very wisely. So that connects with the thing that time is also limited, but it's also non-renewable. So once it's gone, and we can't go back and do a do-over. And so we need to, in the present moment, be connecting more deeply with things that are important, so that we don't end up, in our 70s, 80s, 90s with a whole ton of regret, knowing that we watched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of, Netflix or TV or YouTube or whatever it is, in distraction. So it is your most valuable non-renewable resource. The second one is, no one has more time than anyone else. People just choose to spend their time differently. So this is important to remember because, I mean, almost everyone I talk to says they don't have enough time and they wish they had more time. And when they say it, it's almost like they feel like everyone else seems to have more time, or there are certain people who have more time because they're doing their artwork, and like, I don't know how they're getting the time to do it, but I know that I don't have it. So, this isn't fair that they have time to do it, but I don't have time to do it. So time is the one thing that we all have in equal measure every day, every single person. So the most wealthy, resourceful billionaire on the planet or whatever, they still only have 24 hours in the day. They can't buy an extra, couple of minutes or an hour a day. And so they're obviously doing something different to what everyone else is doing. So they are allocating their time and attention in a specific way that gets them to that result. Someone who is a massive bodybuilder, they are allocating time in a different way that allows them to get to that result. So they don't have more time than I do or that you do, but I don't look like a bodybuilder because I'm not valuing that as a way to spend time, and so therefore I'm not making time for it. But for that person, it's extremely important, and so they only have 24 hours a day, and they're likely not being paid, to be a professional bodybuilder or whatever. So they're probably working a construction job where they were using their body all day, and then they go to the gym for 3-5 hours. I have no idea, obviously, right? So this comes back to the thing that no one has more time than anyone else. People just choose to spend their time differently. So someone who's a bodybuilder, they don't have more time than I do, they just choose to spend it that way. Someone who's a billionaire, they don't have more time than I do, they just choose to spend their time pursuing that. Someone who is producing lots of artwork, they don't have more time than I do or than you do. They're just choosing to spend more of their time producing artwork, right? So it's just, that becomes just the end result. There's this great story. I always forget this artist's name, but he's a jazz guitarist. I always think it's George Benson, but it's not. Anyway, so he's a jazz guitarist from the 50s, and he developed this method of playing guitar with his thumb. So if you don't know how guitars are played, normally with a plectrum, right, and you're plucking the strings. And so he learned to play it with his thumb, which he generated this entire new style of jazz guitar. And the reason he did that was because he had something like 7 kids, and he would work all day. So he'd get up at like 5 or something. He would work all day. Then he'd come home. He would help with the kids. The kids would go to bed, and then he would practice guitar for like 5 hours into the night, like till 2 in the morning or something, 2 or 3 in the morning. Then he would get up a couple hours later, and he would go to work. And he worked some really physically demanding job, and but he was able to become an incredible virtuoso guitar player who blazed the trail of an entire new method of playing guitar. So the reason I tell this story is that he didn't have more time than other guitar players. He just chose to spend the time differently. I think you're getting the point, right? Just ramming these home. I'm trying to squish them into your mind to take these new mindsets on in your life. All right. So the next one is spend, invest, waste, save, give, don't have enough freedom. So the reason I put these words in here is because you will notice that these words we also use with time as well as money. So, that's how you spend time. You can invest your time, you can waste time, you can save time, you can give time. You don't have enough money, you can have financial freedom. The same with, yeah, so there's financial and then there's the time. So you can spend time. How are you going to spend your time? Are you going to invest your time in learning like you are now? High five. You can waste time. You can save time. You can give your time to others. You can feel like you don't have enough time. And you can also have time freedom, which is when you have an abundance of time. So the reason I put this in here is to make the connection of the how much we value time in our language. And so obviously in our mind, conceptually, we value time in the way that we value money. And people say time is money. I don't really get exactly what that means, but that it is again a very valuable resource. That this is kind of where I talked about. I want to give you a tangible, palpable sense of time. I want you to think about time when you're giving time to someone. It should be like a giving act, like you're giving a gift of your time. You can save time by being more efficient and effective in how you do things. You can waste time just by kind of mindlessly letting it slip through your fingers. You can invest time, like I said, you're doing now. You can do something now that's going to benefit you in the future. So that's also your practice. That's, I think, about daily practice is really an investment of time. So invest in developing my skills and my singing, and for you it might be painting. And then we spend time. So the thing is that every day it's like we get 20, let's just say $24 of time, which is 24 hours, and we have to spend all 24 each day. And then it's really about noticing where those $24 go each day. So with the $24 you have, how well are you looking after those $24? Are you investing them? Are you spending them in the right places? Are you giving some away? Are you giving too much away? Are you wasting some of it on things that aren't valuable and aren't good for you long term? So that's another thought experiment for you to think about. So maybe even if you look over the last 24 hours, probably 8 of those you spent on sleep, which is actually a really good investment. You should spend 7 or 8 of those dollars every day consistently on sleep. And then think about how you spent the other times. It's going to be quite confronting when we think about it. So, so that's that example of time. I hope you're digging this. And I hope the internet connection is still up. Okay. So, let's go on to the next one. If you've got any questions at any point, also please hit me up. Also, just as a heads up, I feel like this session is probably going to go definitely for longer than an hour. They're normally, sort of scheduled for an hour, but this is probably going to go for an hour and a half. We might even go for 2 hours if you're up for it, how much detail you want to go into. So I might move through these next ones so we can move on. But Mortality Motivation is the next one. So, you ain't dead yet, so get busy living. Yours sincerely, Death. So I got a story for you. So, I wanted to get more connected with this idea of the unlimited nature of, or the limited nature of how much time we have. So I had this porcelain little skull, and I put it on the edge of my desk where I could see it basically from my bed. And I put this little sticker next to it. Hopefully you can read this okay. But basically, it says, "You ain't dead yet, so get busy living. Yours sincerely, Death." So the reason I put that there was as a reminder that, once I wake up, like I have these $24 to spend, and I really need to be very careful about how I spend them, because I don't have an infinite supply of these dollars to spend. And I also, actually, you probably saw that says on that piece of paper, it said YGYL clip. So that stands for You've Got Your Life clip. So that's my folder for a music video that I put together for a song called You've Got Your Life, which comes from this idea because a friend of mine passed away when he was 37, and it was kind of pretty unexpected, and he kind of got an illness and passed away, and it was a really crazy experience to go through with him. And I ended up writing that song called You've Got Your Life, and the next line is, so what are you going to do with it? And so it's really asks this question to think about your mortality, to know that however, you don't even know how long you actually have. It could be a couple of years, it could be a decade, it could be another 40 years, it could be 50. But at some point, it's worth doing the kind of the this visualization that I have done at workshops before, which is visualizing yourself. Actually, this is quite morbid, but if you'll go with me, it's visualizing yourself in at your own funeral, and then listening to people talk about you, basically giving the eulogy about you, and talking about um, how you would like for them to speak about you at your funeral. So, when I first did this exercise, I actually started crying. It was really moving because it made me think about, oh man, I'm going to die. And I want my life to have, been meant something and have been a contribution to others, and I want to live it in a, bold and inspiring and exciting way that brings my full gifts into the world. So essentially I was going through that visualization and thinking about those things. So that's another exercise I highly recommend you do. So essentially it's your funeral and you're writing out, what the eulogy is that you would love for people to give at your funeral. What would you love for them to say about you, about how you lived your life and what you contributed and all of that stuff. So, oh man, I'm giving you some good shit tonight. So thanks for being here live. If you're catching this on the replay, hope you're enjoying it. Okay, so next point's pretty straightforward. You are going to die. You will run out of time. That means you just have to make the absolute most of it right now. We can't wait. You can't wait until next week to get onto it. And you can't wait till, next year, which is actually going to be next decade. We're starting a new decade in about 5 weeks' time. And so this is here to remind you that you can't waste any time. There is no time to waste. So, some heavy shit. I should have slipped some jokes in here somewhere. All right. Next one is your life. The entirety of your life is a macro expression of your years all put together. And your years are made up of all of your months. And your months are made up of your weeks. And your weeks are made up of your days. And your days are made up of your hours. And your hours are made up of minutes. Your minutes are made up of seconds. And this idea is that if I could take a snapshot of a day of yours, just a general day, an average day, I could basically extrapolate that out to a lifetime size, and it would be a pretty clear and direct relationship between the two. So if you think about people who, artists who have created great bodies of work and really created a life that is inspiring, the overall life expression was really made up of the overall years, months, weeks, days, minutes, seconds. Does that make sense? So this is another way of sort of compressing that lifetime vision and longer term vision of what you want to contribute as an artist and what you want to do, and compressing it into your days and your weeks. So your days and your weeks should reflect in the present moment what you want it to look like on the bigger scale over a lifetime. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So if you want to have a great life, it's all about having great minutes and great seconds and great hours and days. And they all sort of add up. It's kind of, another way of thinking about it is it's like the fractal, the idea of the fractal, where the small element of the fractal is a tiny representation of the larger image of the fractal. So, oh yeah, truth bombs galore. So if we're in a workshop right now, I'd say turn to your partner, give them a high five, woo-choo, and tell them you're awesome. All right. So, are we ready for phase 2? Okay. So now we're going to get into more of the nuts and bolts. I hope you've been enjoying this first part of it, which is all the conceptual stuff. Now we're going to get into some exercises and a bit more strategy. So I just want to check this is still working. Yes. Awesome. Okay. So next we're going to talk about importance versus urgency. And then we're going to talk about sort of how to make this all happen, essentially. Okay. So I'm going to do something new right now that I haven't done before. I'm going to do some drawing. I'm going to do some drawing live. So I haven't done this before, so just bear with me for a second. I'm going to see if this is going to work out. Okay. So I'm going to be watching multiple screens here. Well, okay. So here we go. Let's see if we can do this. All right. Come on. There we go. All right. Sweet. So looks like this is going to work. Hi there. Okay. So we're going to talk about this, the quadrant here, importance versus urgency. So in previous sessions, you might have seen me talk about this. And so I want to go a bit deeper into this. I feel like I can never quite go deep enough into this to give people the felt sense of why this is so important. But here we go. So I'm going to draw up the quadrant here. So here we've got the quadrant. Over here we have importance. And then down here we have the scale of urgency. And then this is a scale of 0 to 10 and 0 to 10 over here. So in this first quadrant here, this is called distraction. So distractions are things that are low in importance and they're also low in urgency. So these are the kinds of things like just checking out Facebook, hanging out on Instagram, just taking, random phone calls with people. Actually, that's going to kind of be over in the next quadrant. Watching Netflix for hours, watching TV, just reading blogs or articles or magazines or whatever. Things that are sort of, they feel good in the moment, but they're actually not serving you long term. So these are distractions. And they steal a lot of our time. So in the next quadrant, we've got things that are high in urgency, but low in importance. And these are interruptions. So this is more like getting phone calls from people randomly throughout the day, or if you work with clients and a client, just kind of dumps something on your desk and says, "Oh, do you reckon you could get this to me, this afternoon?" It's also just text messages, your email pinging and kind of getting your attention. If you work in a studio with others and they come in and they're constantly interrupting you, if you work from home and your partner is interrupting you, or housemates, or whatever it might be, then these are interruptions, and they also steal a lot of our time, and they end up distracting us and taking up a lot of our time. So that's interruptions. So, and then up here where we've got high in urgency and high in importance, these are what I call emergencies, or critical activities, as it is in the book there. And so emergencies, these are things that are high in importance and high in urgency. So these are things like, your friend breaks their leg and you have to take them to the hospital. It's also projects that have a really intense deadline that you can't move and you have to respond to it. Otherwise, there's a huge consequence for not responding. So a client gets angry, or you don't get your work in the show, or you don't get your application in. So this could be kind of getting to an application too late. And so they're emergencies, and we want to avoid them at all costs, because as human beings, we respond to things that are high in urgency because there's a sense that it needs to be dealt with right now. And if it's important and urgent, then it gets all of our attention, and it's really difficult to move away from those things. And then over here is something that's really important, and it's your art. So the reason that it goes in this quadrant is because it is high in importance. It's really important because you want to do it and you love doing it, but it's not urgent, meaning there's not someone looking over your shoulder saying, "Hey, where's that piece of work?" Unless it is in a show and you have to get it done, and then it tends to fall into that emergency category. But most of the time, this art quadrant is very easy to ignore because it's not urgent, essentially, and because it's important. It usually means that it comes with a little bit of effort, that we need to make a little bit of effort to make it happen. So as an example, the other things that live in this quadrant are things like eating well, exercising, nurturing relationships, and anything that's really good for you long term essentially goes in here. And it's essentially all the things that that are really good for you, that you probably want to do more of, like meditation and things like that. Because meditation is really important, but it's just not that urgent. So, it's easy to get around it and avoid doing it. So this really is the place where you want to aim to be spending as much time as possible. So this can also be called like the zone, or the bullseye, where you want to be spending as much time as possible. So like we talked about before, we've got a lot of control of your schedule, and so we want to create as much time in here as possible. So how do we do that? So we do that by, why isn't there a red? I want a red pen. So the way that we do it is by identifying how much time we're spending in distraction, how much time we're spending in interruptions, and how much time we're spending in emergencies. Because like I said, we can't get more time. We've got those $24 in a day. We have $168 a week to spend. And so we want to figure out not so much how do we get more time, but it's how do we choose to spend our time differently. So we're going to do an exercise very soon that's going to help you identify what your distractions are. And so what we want to do is we want to take all the dollars and resources you're spending on distraction, and we want to start moving it over here. We want to start moving it towards things that are meaningful and important to you. We want to take all the time and the money and the resources and effort and energy that is getting stuck in interruptions, and we want to start moving it in this direction towards the things that you love and want to do more of. And if your week is full of kind of last minute emergencies and things like that, we want to come up with strategies that take any of those, that time, energy, resources, mental, energy, and take as much of it away from emergencies and pour it all in here into your art or to the other fulfilling things that you want to do with your time. And if you think about removing the distractions in your life and how they don't actually make you feel very good, like, I've never spent an hour on Instagram and then kind of looked away and gone, oh wow, I just feel so much better now. So we want to remove distractions, take the interruptions away, remove emergencies, and give that time to the things we love. This is ultimately how you can start living a more balanced life, doing more of the things you love doing. So I don't know about you, but that's kind of what I want to do. So so that's that example there. So what I want you to do, if you haven't already started doing it, is filling out the table below, which are the distractions. So just mainly doing the left column right now. So make a list of your top 5 distractions. Where's the time going? Where are you spending those time dollars each day that could be classed as distractions? So that could be, like I said, Facebook, social media, just getting caught up in email, watching YouTube, Netflix, just all those we all know what the time wasters are. And we can try to rationalize them saying, oh yeah, but I'm learning stuff and I'm doing research. But you're not. You're distracting yourself from what's really important, which is, taking action on your art. And then the next one, let's go to interruptions. So what are your top 5 interruptions? Do you have a housemate that's interrupting you, studio mates that interrupt you? Do your family call you all the time? Do you have long conversations with your family that probably could get done in a shorter period of time, or they could be done, in the evenings rather than during sort of times where you want to be doing creative work? Critical activities, are there things that sneak up on you that steal your time? They become really urgent and important. So that could be just other people kind of, dumping their workload on you, or if you keep running yourself into deadlines. So filling that out. And then important activities. So your art. So your art, I want you to put that as number 1. And then other things that are important to you. So that might be like yoga or meditation, or quality time with your partner, or quality time with your family, whatever that might be. And so we want to have more time for those things and less time for all the lame things that we don't even like. All right. So once you've done that, I want you to take a moment to then look over to the right-hand column, and I want you to come up with a strategy or an action for each one of those. And you can do this pretty quickly. I'm going to give you a really simple tip. Anything that's in the distraction zone, your strategy for this week and for next week, for this week until we sort of have another session, which is next Tuesday, your strategy for that is going to be stop doing it. So if it's, spending an hour or 2 on Instagram every day, stop doing it. So I want you to see if you want to make the choice to either severely limit it by saying, okay, I'm only going to spend 10 minutes a day on this, or just choose to uninstall it from your phone and have a week off. You can always reinstall it a week later or 2 weeks later. And just go on a social media detox. This is going to be one of the best things that you do. I was mentoring someone a while ago who was sort of constantly getting caught up in Twitter. And I suggested she go on a social media detox, and she did it for 7 days. And the next session, she was like, oh my God, I just had the best week. I just didn't get caught up in, all the normal stuff I get caught up in. I was able to be focused, I had a clear head, all that stuff. So that's my recommendation. With interruptions, that might take a little bit more strategy. So if you get calls during the day that interrupt you, I recommend you put your phone on flight mode. If you have a partner or studio mates that interrupt you, I recommend you just communicate with them and say, hey, I'm working on something at the moment. I need to focus, and so if you need something, can we make a time later to talk or something like that? So you want to remove interruptions, critical activities, come up with a strategy, and then important activities. This one is the flip side. This is what's the strategy so that you can do more of this thing. So if it's your art, you might decide, well, I can decide to go to the studio 2 or 3 times a week consistently. If it's your yoga, I'm going to do yoga 2 times a week. If it's your family, I'm going to chat to 2 family members each week and have a good phone conversation, whatever it is. So I want you to come up with strategies that are going to work for you. I'm going to give you a little minute to do that before we go on to the next bit. If you've got any questions, please fire away. Here we go. Okie dokie. So, I hope you're digging this. I hope you are loving it. Okie dokie. All right. All right, Hannah, thank you for being here. You're hitting the hay. All right. So let's move on to the next bit. So this is about how to track what is important to you and how you are currently spending your time, and then how to kind of shift these things. But the first thing to do is to get a good awareness of how you're currently spending time. And so this is actually if you have the PDF open of this worksheet and you go to page 8, there's a link there where you can download my weekly planner. So what I recommend is you do a time budget of all the activities you undertook this past week. So just the last 7 days or just last week. So that might be, you went to work, you went to the studio on 2 nights, you did some yoga, you had some social time, you basically faffed around on Saturday, whatever you did. And just as best as you can recall it, basically draw out what you did last week. And then I want you to label each activity with how long you did it for. And then I want you to label each activity with the corresponding quadrant. So 1, 2, 3, or 4. So if you give it a 1, they're your important goals. So that's, working on your art or doing positive things for your health or whatever it might be. Number 2 is any critical activities or deadlines you were working to. Number 3 is distractions. Number 4 is interruptions. So, yeah, you can print that out and go through that exercise of drawing out how you spent time and then allocating how you were spending time. And then essentially coming up with a percentage of time. So if you sort of had, let's just say it was 100 hours during the week and you spent 10 hours on important goals and 20 hours on this, 20 hours on that, and then 50 hours on whatever else, then that's going to start to give you some percentages as to how you're spending time. You ultimately want to try to get yourself to spending about 70% of your time in the art zone, doing things that are important but not urgent. This is really where the gold is. This is where the gold of life is. So have a look at last week and just sort of assess how you were spending time. And then I want you to do the same for the coming week. So basically you print out that planner for the coming week. And then as you go through the week, you just note down how you were spending time. So maybe, you got up and you just went to work, and then you came home, and then you watched some TV, and then you did some artwork. You can just note that down, just block out those times. And then at the end of the day, you might just want to label which quadrant they might go into. So people often ask where work fits into this quadrant, and it really depends. If you do work you love, then it's important and not urgent. But for most people, if you're working, for someone else, a 9 to 5 kind of thing, then that often will go into the critical activities, because there's a big consequence if you don't tend to it. That's kind of how you know whether it's high in urgency. But I would ultimately call it a distraction or an interruption to your real life. But yeah, that's kind of how to think about that. Okay.